The drive home. I remember that night clearly. It wasn't stormy, nor particularly foggy, yet there was something about the air that felt heavier than usual. I had stayed late at work, and by the time I locked the office door behind me, the streets were practically empty. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch like fingers across the pavement. My car sat alone in the parking lot, and as I slid into the driver's seat, I felt that familiar sigh of relief, being inside my own space, enclosed, safe, or so I thought. The drive began normally, radio playing some soft indie songs, the hum of tires against asphalt calming my frayed nerves. I had always liked driving at night. It was quiet, reflective, and the city felt like it belonged to me alone. But somewhere around the third intersection, I felt it. The first subtle hint that something wasn't right. A faint weight on the back seat. Just a slight impression in the fabric of the seat, as if someone had been sitting there moments before I got in. I paused mid-turn, heart thudding, and glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing. Empty. The street behind me was clear. My pulse slowed, and I told myself it was ridiculous, just my imagination. Maybe the seatbelt had been pressed down earlier by a coworker's bag or some leftover item. I shook my head and laughed at myself, muttering, "You're tired, that's all." But the feeling didn't leave. Each stoplight, each turn, I could almost feel a presence hovering behind me. Not visible, not tangible, just there. And then I started noticing little things. The faint scent of perfume, a floral, almost sweet smell drifting from the back seat. A scent I hadn't used or encountered in years. It brought back memories of my grandmother's old car, the one she used to drive when I was a kid. She'd always have a faint fragrance lingering in the air, subtle yet unmistakable. I shook my head again, convincing myself it was nothing. I reached a quiet stretch of road, the kind that bends sharply and disappears into darkness, and that's when I saw it in the rearview mirror. Or rather, I thought I did. A flicker of movement, like a shadow shifting, just for a second, on the back seat. My stomach dropped. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. I told myself it was a trick of the dim streetlights, my own eyes playing games after a long day. I considered stopping, turning on the dome light, checking the seat, but I didn't. My rational mind fought against the creeping unease, whispering that I'd feel foolish, that maybe I was imagining things. So I kept driving, slow and cautious. The city's hum faded as I drove farther from the center. Street lights grew sparse, houses fewer, their windows dark like hollow eyes watching silently. That's when I felt it again. A presence, heavier this time, as though someone had shifted their weight, leaning slightly forward. My heart raced. I dared not glance at the back seat directly. I felt if I did, I might see something that would change everything. The radio began to crackle, soft static at first, then more persistent. It wasn't my station, nor did it respond to the dial. Whispered voices seemed to float through the speakers. I leaned forward, trying to catch a word or a phrase, but it was just fragments, almost like a language I knew but couldn't quite understand. The words faded as quickly as they came, leaving only silence and the thumping of my own heartbeat. I reached for my phone, hoping to call someone, anyone, to break the tension, but the battery had inexplicably dropped to zero. No signal, nothing. Just the dark road, the empty street, and that unshakable feeling of being watched.
The next few days were a blur of tension and unease. Every time I got into my car, I felt it. The weight, the presence, the whisper of something unseen sitting just behind me. At first, I tried to ignore it, telling myself that the first night had been a fluke, a trick of fatigue and stress. But the subtle signs kept appearing, impossible to dismiss. It started small. My sunglasses would be misplaced, not on the passenger seat where I always left them, but lying diagonally across the back seat. A jacket I knew I had hung neatly on the hook would be crumpled, as if someone had leaned against it. At first, I thought I was losing track of things, absent-minded. But then, one evening, I arrived home to find the back seat slightly warm, as though someone had been sitting there not long ago. I had been alone all day. I tried talking about it to a friend, just to hear my own thoughts aloud. "You're tired," I told him. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt the weight of doubt pressing in. "Maybe," he said, forcing a smile, "but still, if it's really bothering you, you should check your car. Lock it up. Take it to a mechanic. Something." I couldn't. I didn't want to see what I might see. It wasn't curiosity. It was fear. Fear of confirming that my own mind was not entirely my own, that my safe, familiar car had become a vessel for something else. And then, the noises began. Almost imperceptible at first. A soft scrape, as though fingernails traced the leather back seat. A whisper of movement just beyond the driver's seat. I started recording audio on my phone during drives, hoping to catch a rational explanation. Most of the recordings were empty, just my own breathing and the faint hum of the engine. But occasionally, a soft sigh or whispered word would emerge, distorted and faint, but undeniably there. I couldn't explain it. It wasn't my imagination, not entirely. I knew the difference between a figment of tired eyes and a pattern of events repeating itself in terrifying synchronicity. This was real. One night, I left work later than usual. The streets were nearly empty, and the air carried a chill that made my fingers stiff on the steering wheel. I tried to distract myself with music, but the radio wouldn't cooperate. Static at first, like the signal was struggling, then whispers again. This time I could make out fragments. "Drive faster. Don't look back." My pulse raced. I wanted to stop the car, to get out, to run. But I couldn't. My hands were frozen on the wheel, my eyes darting to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a face I had never known. I glanced at the back seat. Nothing. But the seatbelt had shifted again, creating that same unmistakable impression of someone leaning forward. The perfume returned, stronger this time, almost suffocating in the confined space. It wasn't just the smell. It was a memory, a presence from another time, almost maternal, almost familiar, yet completely alien. That night, I took a different route home, trying to avoid the feeling of being followed, but the sensation persisted. A shadow in the corner of my eye, a shifting weight on the back seat, like a heartbeat in the leather itself. At home, I couldn't bring myself to step out of the car immediately. I sat there, engine off, lights dimmed, trying to rationalize. My mind wandered back to old stories my grandmother used to tell, about spirits that lingered in familiar spaces, bound by memory or unfinished business. I had never believed in such things. Not really. But sitting there, frozen, I began to wonder if she had been trying to warn me. The following morning, I decided to inspect the back seat carefully. My hands trembled as I ran my fingers across the fabric. There, faintly embossed in the leather, were marks, indentations, almost like the shape of a person's legs and shoulders. I hadn't noticed them before, or perhaps I had refused to. I tried to photograph them, but each picture came out blurred, dark shadows stretching unnaturally across the seats. It was as though the camera itself refused to capture what lingered there. I began to keep a small notebook in my glove compartment, jotting down every incident. The shifting seatbelt, the misplaced items, the whispers, the scent. Each entry felt more surreal than the last, and yet I couldn't stop. I had to document it, to prove to myself that it wasn't just in my mind. One evening, after a particularly long day, I parked my car in the driveway, exhausted. I wanted nothing more than to shut the door and disappear into my apartment, to forget the day and the presence I could no longer ignore. But when I reached for the door handle, I froze.
The next few days passed like a waking nightmare. Every drive felt like a test of endurance, how long I could keep my eyes forward, my hands steady, my mind from unraveling. My car had become both a necessity and a trap. I couldn't avoid it. I needed it to get to work, to run errands. But every time I slid into the driver's seat, my stomach knotted. The notebook in my glove compartment filled with entries. The phenomena were no longer sporadic. They were consistent, purposeful. Sometimes faint fingerprints appeared on the inside of the rear windows. Other times the radio would turn itself on before I even started the car, whispering static like a heartbeat. I told myself I would not look back anymore. That had become my mantra. Don't look back. It felt like a fragile barrier between myself and whatever sat behind me. But barriers, I've learned, don't last forever. One Thursday night, I left work later than usual. The parking lot was deserted, the city quieter than I'd ever seen it. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the glow of my dashboard, my hands trembling. I could feel it waiting, patient in the back seat. Not visible, not audible, yet undeniably there. I started the car. The engine's hum was almost comforting. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Just the road stretching ahead, the glow of streetlights blurring as rain began to fall in soft, misty sheets. I took a deep breath. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight it would leave me alone. But halfway down the empty stretch of County Road, the temperature in the car plummeted. My breath came out in pale, visible clouds. The radio crackled and died. The scent of perfume returned, this time so thick it felt like drowning in memory. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. "I don't want this," I whispered aloud, though I didn't know who I was speaking to. "Please, just leave me alone." Something shifted on the back seat. A sound this time, fabric creasing like someone adjusting their position. My heart slammed against my ribs, my vision blurred, tears threatening to spill. "Stop," I choked out. "Stop, please!" Then a voice, soft, almost gentle, but undeniably behind me. "Why are you afraid?" The words were low, like a whisper caught in a dream. For a moment I thought I'd imagined it, but then it spoke again. "You invited me." I nearly swerved off the road. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might break. My throat was dry, but I forced out a shaky reply. "I didn't invite anyone." Silence, and then a laugh, not cruel, but hollow, like an echo of something that had once been human. I flicked on the dome light in a burst of panic. The back seat was empty, utterly empty, but the seatbelt hung taut, as if under tension. My mind flashed back to my grandmother again, to those quiet afternoons in her car, her soft humming, the same perfume lingering in the air. She'd once told me, in a rare moment of candor, that cars remember. I'd laughed back then, thought she meant the old upholstery or the faint stains of spilled coffee. But now the memory felt like a warning. The whispers grew louder. Not words this time, but a rising tide of static and murmurs that filled the car, pressing against my skull. I fumbled for my phone, desperate to record it, but the screen flickered and died, black as a void. And then I made the mistake. I looked back. For a split second I saw her, or it, a pale outline seated directly behind me, her face obscured, her hair hanging like a curtain. She wasn't quite solid, more like the echo of a person, flickering like a bad signal. But I felt her eyes, cold and ancient, fixed on me. I screamed. The car swerved. My headlights illuminated a row of trees far too close, and I yanked the wheel back, tires screeching. When I straightened the car, the back seat was empty again. My hands shook violently as I pulled over onto the shoulder. I sat there for what felt like hours, my chest heaving, the scent of perfume still clinging to the air. In the dim glow of the dashboard, something caught my eye. My notebook, open to a page I hadn't written. 3 words scrawled across it in an unfamiliar hand. "I'm still here." My blood ran cold. I slammed the notebook shut and shoved it back into the glove compartment, my fingers trembling. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't. I sat there in the dark, tears slipping down my cheeks, my body frozen between terror and disbelief. The presence wasn't just following me anymore. It was inside the car, inside my life, writing its own words in my notebook. And for the first time, a terrible question formed in my mind. A question I hadn't dared to ask before. What if it wasn't a stranger? What if it was someone I knew?